The movie begins in a pharmaceutical facility for genetic therapy called GenSci's. Terry Notary, a female monkey who was given the medication ALZ-112 and was given the name Bright Eyes by the personnel, was assigned the number 9. She has mastered the Towers of Hanoi puzzle in 20 moves, which is near to a perfect score of 15, and is friendlier and calmer than typical apes. James Franco's character Will Rodman speaks with his employer Steve Jacobs, David Oyelowo, persuading him that he has information that will allow them to move on with the drug's human testing. The following day, Rodman and Jacobs show up in the GenSci's conference room to address the board of directors. Will says that the new medication promotes neurogenesis, the development of new brain cells, something that doesn't generally occur after birth, and could treat a variety of degenerative brain diseases like Parkinson's and Alzheimer's. The drug's only negative effect is a green sparkle in the individual's eyes after exposure. Robert Franklin, Tyler Labini, the senior ape keeper, is having a hard time getting Bright Eyes out of her cage back at the lab. Robert and the other helpers are the targets of her hostile behavior. They try to use orange soda to entice her out of the cage, but when they use a lasso pole to catch her, she turns ape and runs riot through the structure. The pursuit comes to a stop when she flies through the conference room's glass window, killing the security personnel inside the building. Jacobs declares the drug research dead, foreseeing that what they saw with Bright Eyes was a violent side effect of the substance. Will tries to convince Jacobs to change his mind, but Jacobs rejects him and says he intends to put down the remaining test apes. Roberts reveals to Will a young ape that was hidden in Bright Eyes' cell after arriving back at the lab. This clarifies that their presumption was incorrect. Bright Eyes' aggressive behavior was motivated by protecting her infant, not by the drug. Will is given the job since Roberts lacks the courage to put the baby down. He decides to take the child home because he is unwilling to do so. Will goes back to his parents' house, where he lives with Charles, John Lithgow, when Will is not present. Charles needs nursing care because he has Alzheimer's. Charles is immediately enamored with the young monkey after Will shows him. Because of his apparent admiration of Shakespeare's Julius Caesar, Charles jokingly refers to the infant as Caesar. After only 2 days, Caesar makes remarkable development and can feed himself. Caesar appears to have inherited the virus-based ALZ-112 from his mother. His temporary stay with Will lasts for 3 years, during which time Will creates a room for him in the attic. Although somewhat ape-like, Caesar, Andy Serkis, who is now half-grown, is a cherished member of the family and demonstrates amazing intelligence by using sign language to convey complicated thoughts. While Charles' Alzheimer's disease is worsening and he has an argument with his nurse, Caesar has been demonstrating mental progress. Will steals a LZ-112 from GenSci's, taking a significant risk. Charles receives a dose from him, and when Will discovers his father playing flawlessly at the piano the next day, it seems the medication is a miracle cure. Caesar, who has come to love watching the neighbors play outside, escapes through the window and enters their neighbor's backyard. But when the neighbor's daughter sees him, she is scared, and her father, Hunsicker, David Hewlett, snaps at Caesar. Caesar is eventually saved by Will and Charles, but not before Hunsicker hurts him. Caesar is treated in a zoo undercover by Will. There, Carolina Ranha, Freda Pinto, a veterinarian, cares for Caesar. Caroline is impressed by Caesar's mastery of sign language while the procedure is being performed. He even makes the suggestion that Will and Caroline go out to dinner in sign language. They take Caesar across the Golden Gate Bridge to a redwood forest for some outdoor play to quell his wanderlust. When they reach the woodland, Caesar refuses to part ways with Will and instead extends his arm with his palm upward in an apparent request for permission to play. After receiving Will's okay, Caesar climbs the trees. After 5 years, Caesar has grown, and Caroline now resides with the Rodman family. Will has even begun donning a shirt and pants on him. When a dog barks angrily at Caesar while they are in the wilderness, Caesar responds with a savage yell that frightens the dog away. Will observes that Caesar is dejected and uncertain of who or what he is. As they pass Gensize, Will tells Caesar about the medicine that increased his intelligence and the passing of his mother. Charles' state has gotten worse in the 5 years since he was prescribed ALZ-112. Will argues that since his immune system has produced antibodies, a more virulent virus is required. Will takes a chance by visiting Jacobs, disclosing his covert research with his father, and elaborating on how the medicine not only treats brain damage but also enhances intelligence. The virus, he claims, has undergone certain changes, and new animal experimentation requires Jacob's approval. Charles wanders outdoors and into their neighbor's automobile after becoming lost at home. He tries to drive it, but breaks it in the process. Charles is yanked out of the car by Hunsicker, the same neighbor who attacked Caesar. Due to his insane state, Charles is unable to explain why he is there. Caesar observes this through an attic window and quickly leaves the house after hearing the neighbor yell and push Charles. When Hunsicker is attacked, he knocks him to the ground, jumps on him, beats him, and then bites off a finger. When he sees Caesar, Charles cries, "Caesar, no." Caesar retreats and approaches Charles. Animal control is ordered by the court to transport Caesar to a primate sanctuary as a result of the incident. After saying goodbye, Will and Caroline lead him inside. Caesar finds the sanctuary to be challenging in his early days. It is run by John Landon, Brian Cox, whose short-tempered and violent son Dodge, Tom Felton, and a timid man named Rodney, Jamie Harris, are in charge of the animal's upkeep. When Caesar laughs and hurls his food towards Dodge, the latter retaliates fiercely by spraying Caesar with a fire hose, driving the scared animal into a cage corner. Caesar meets the group's dominant male, an ape by the name of Rocket, also Terry Notary. When the other animals are released with him in the main play area, Caesar is beaten by Rocket when he tears off his shirt. Caesar also notices an orangutan next to Bick's cage who is using sign language, as well as a gorilla named Buck, Richard Ridings, in a confined cage. The sanctuary sends 12 apes to Gensize for the testing of ALZ-113, the updated version of ALZ-112. Once more in charge of the testing, Will selects Kobar, a somewhat frazzled gorilla, Christopher Gordon, as his first subject. Kobar is restrained while receiving the new medication through a breathing apparatus. Kobar resists, though, and the machine's hose comes off, with the exception of Robert, who gets unintentionally exposed. Almost everyone in the lab is wearing a breathing mask. That evening, Will treats his father at home with some of the ALZ-113. Charles declines the treatment and passes away that evening while sleeping. Will notices a copy of Julius Caesar after Caroline and he have finished packing the rest of Charles' possessions. Sometime later, Dodge invites a few of his cronies into the cage area of the sanctuary, where Caesar succeeds in robbing a visitor of a pocket knife. Caesar lets loose the enormous gorilla in the yard named Buck, who is always kept in a cage, and makes friends with him. Rocket is then let out and makes his way into the yard. With a steel gas can, Caesar strikes the man. Rocket is prepared to engage in combat, but he submits after realizing that Buck is committed to Caesar and will defend him. Now, Caesar is the dominant male. Later, Caesar lets Rocket out of the cage area and allows him to distribute one of Dodge's stolen cookies to each ape, strengthening the group's unity. Additionally, Caesar discovered a path and the controls for the windowed enclosure above the play area. When Will gets back to work, he discovers that Jacobs has rashly and avariciously advanced the study timeline. Wood cautions Jacobs that the main issue they need to be concerned about is how the newer ALZ-113 would harm humanity, whereas Jacobs is only focused on commercial profits. Will leaves Gensize after Jacobs dismisses his concerns. Robert has been suffering from the virus's after effects, including sneezing that causes blood droplets to come out of his sinuses. Will returns to the orangutan sanctuary and makes an effort to buy off John Landon so that he will give him Caesar. While Will tries to get Caesar to accompany him, Caesar declines despite John's willingness to do so. Caesar leaves that evening through the window he discovered and returns home. He takes ALZ-113 out of Rodman's fridge and delivers it to the gorillas at the sanctuary. John Landon witnesses the apes holding what appears to be a discussion the following day. The apes disperse as they play it off. Landon brushes it off as just being odd. The following night, as the apes were being led back to their cages, Caesar resisted, squaring off with Dodge in the yard and defeating him. Dodge commands the person grabbing him to take your stinking paws off me, you damn dirty ape. For the first time, Caesar makes an audible sound, yelling no. As a witness, the other caregiver rushes into the cage area to try to save Dodge, who is now comatose. The apes assault him, but Caesar disperses them and, out of compassion, captures him in his cage. Dodge is slain while attempting to flee. Caesar attacks him with the fire hose while he is wielding a cattle prod. Will calls Caesar at first light but gets no answer. When he arrives to look around, he discovers the buildings destroyed, the gorillas missing, and the ALZ-113 canisters in the cage sections open. Choosing to sound the alarm. The apes are currently moving through the city. They are split into two categories by Caesar. While Caesar guides the second group to gensize, Buck travels with one group to the zoo to free the apes there. Robert visits Will's house to talk to him, but Will isn't there, and Hunsicker, Will's irritable next-door neighbor, approaches Robert. Robert suddenly sneezes on him. Later, a woman discovers Robert dead in his building. Jacobs, who has just arrived at work, is informed of the apes' escape. He discovers that the 12 ALZ-113 test subject tapes have been released when Caesar and the other apes took control of the structure. There is a call to the police, as Caesar and Buck's groups combine. Now about 50 to 60 chimps, orangutans, and gorillas strong. Jacobs boards a police helicopter. The apes, on the other hand, appear to be actively working to stop the deaths of any people they come across. Will and Caroline are aware of the rampage and assume that Caesar is in charge of guiding the apes to the Redwood Forest after learning that they are en route to the Golden Gate Bridge. The officers are ready to fire on the gorillas from the bridge, but Caesar separates his forces once more. To get over the obstacle, one group scales the suspension wires while another swings from the building's base. When Jacob spots Caesar from the helicopter, he instructs the men to aim at him because he believes that by killing Caesar, the others will disperse. Buck, however, jumps onto the helicopter as it hovers close to the bridge and brings it down at the risk of his own life. Caesar mourns the loss of his friend and soon discovers the wreckage of the helicopter perched perilously on the edge of the bridge with Jacobs crying for assistance. Instead, Caesar walks away, and Kobar rams the helicopter into the water, killing Jacobs as it hits. The gorillas continue into the forest. Will snatches a police vehicle and drives into the woods. He shouts Caesar's name, but one of his followers approaches and accosts him. But as soon as Caesar showed up, the others retreated. Will makes an effort to make amends with his friend, offering to look out for Caesar if he travels home with him. Will is startled as Caesar cradles him and whispers, "Caesar is home." Will observes Caesar and several other apes as they scale the trees to study the forest and the surrounding area. In a post-event scene, Hunsicker, Will's next-door neighbor, arrives at San Francisco International Airport to start his shift as a pilot. He becomes aware that he is bleeding from his nose as he makes his way to the jet. The camera pans up, revealing the digital boards flashing to various locations, a warning that these locations will soon become infected with ALZ-113, sealing humanity's doom. The TV and press stories about a troubled manned Mars probe named Icarus that has vanished into space serve as a recurring subplot throughout the movie. What will they discover when they return as astronauts?
Preview.